Chapter 1466, Extra, Deng Shintong 6. The fire dragon surged forward, and there was no room to hide inside the carriage. Deng Shintong put away his gun and drew his sword. White light flickered on his body. Blessing of the holy body. Facing the fire dragon, he chopped it down with a sword, and the fire dragon was split in half from the middle and rushed out of the carriage. The wandering soul saw this and showed a look of horror on his face, but then turned fierce. He clenched his fists, his skin gradually turned blood red, and he opened his mouth and spit out a ball of red flames. The interior of the carriage began to deform due to the scorching temperature. Deng Shintong's face was expressionless, and he still walked forward steadily. The last moment, he was engulfed by the flames. The next moment, he rushed out of the flames. With a flash of cold light, the tip of the long sword burst out with a cold light and directly pierced through the head. The light in the wandering soul's eyes slowly disappeared, and he fell to the ground in the carriage. Deng Shintong looked up and looked forward, where a dozen wandering souls were waiting for him to come over as if they were facing a great enemy. What exactly is the B-level mission going to transport? Deng Shintong thought calmly. It wasn't a very troublesome problem, but he was still thinking about solving the problem here as soon as possible, and then going to eliminate the alien codenamed. Let's make a quick decision. Deng Shintong stepped forward. The superpowers exploded in the carriage, and then the amazing force shattered the bulletproof glass of the window.
Bang! Bang! Bang!
The carriage made of special alloy was distorted and deformed by the explosion, and the shape of a human body was printed out. Deng Shintong quickly passed through the long carriage. The carriage was already full of blood. The silver long sword pointed at the floor, and the blood dripped down, but not a single drop was left on the sword. Bang! He kicked over the heavy alloy door in front of him. At the end of the carriage, Scarface pointed a large spray gun at him. Deng Shintong just glanced at the gun in his hand calmly and then said lightly, "Do you think this kind of thing is useful to me?" In the Jiangnan region, weapons and ammunition used against aliens are monopolized by Blizzard City. Except for aliens certified by the region, it is a felony for anyone else to use weapons against aliens. And ordinary weapons and ammunition are not even a tickle for high-level aliens. Not everyone is Zhang Yi, who has a genius mechanic like Liu Karen to build weapons for him. Scarface sneered and threw the spray gun in his hand aside. "Are you Deng Shintong, the captain of the God Squad? I have heard of your name a long time ago. Let me try how much weight you have today." As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand was placed on the wall of the carriage. The next moment, the entire carriage was covered with sharp ice, and dense ice spikes attacked Deng Shintong. Deng Shintong's footsteps did not stop for a moment. The power of the holy body formed a bright holy ring around him. He walked straight towards the frost storm that was covered with barbs like a monster's mouth. Those sharp ice spikes collapsed at the touch of his holy light, and it was difficult to get close to his body. Wah-la-la dash! The ice shattered, and Scarface's face showed a solemn and stunned expression. He knew that the captain of Blizzard City was very strong, but as the king of the snowfield wandering soul, he had never thought that the gap between them would be so huge. Retreat. This thought flashed in his mind for the first time, so he quickly swept back like a fox and soon came to the edge of the carriage. His right hand was placed on the carriage, and the frost quickly covered the connection of the carriage, trying to separate this carriage from the front and throw Deng Shintong off. But the next moment, a white light flashed in front of his eyes, and a tiny light spot in his pupil quickly enlarged in front of his eyes, and finally turned into a sharp sword tip. In Scarface's mind, a revolving lantern appeared at this moment, and the crisis of death completely enveloped him.
Boom!
From his body, a surging ice-blue frost storm gushed out crazily, intercepting him and Deng Shintong.
The
powerful supernatural power even set off a violent blizzard on the snowfield. However, this terrifying power only slowed down Deng Shintong's speed for a moment. But it was only for a moment. The silver holy light burst out, melting his cold frost like the sun melting the spring snow, and then stabbed his chest with a sword. Scarface looked down at his chest in astonishment. The long sword had already sunk halfway into his chest, piercing his entire body. Is this the strength of the captain of Blizzard City? The disobedience, who are not affiliated with official institutions or have some cooperation with official institutions, do not have much concept of the supernatural power index. They only roughly know the general classification of supernatural powers. So Scarface naturally thought that he was a Delta-level alien and the master of wandering souls who roamed the snowfields, so he should be strong and not much behind the captain-level figures in Blizzard City. It was not until this moment before his death that he saw the gap between himself and the captain level. Deng Shintong drew out his sword with a bang, and the blood condensed into black and red ice chips the moment it fell to the ground. He looked forward, and instinctively, he felt a strong breath waiting for him in front. Among the wandering souls, there are actually such beings? Deng Shintong frowned. After the advent of the era of great mutation, there are more and more mutants in this world. Some even exist independently of Blizzard City and have the strength of a captain. For example, Zhang Yi is the most miraculous existence. But there is more than one Zhang Yi in this world. Every person who survives needs to do his best to survive. Fight desperately for any resource. This is like raising a goo, eliminating the weak, and the survivors are all powerful mutants. Deng Shintong did not neglect anything and burst out his own supernatural power, praise of light, in an instant. The holy light began to erupt with him as the center, quickly engulfing the entire train. Wherever the eyes can see, there is only light. This is Deng Shintong's ability, which can manipulate light and deprive people of their sight. But at the moment he released his ability, a subtle sound of breaking through the air came from behind the alloy door, breaking through the heavy alloy door and shooting at his body. Deng Shintong's pupils shrank slightly, and his eyes were full of astonishment. The release of supernatural powers by aliens is like breathing. At that moment, there will be a brief gap in the body, and at this time, there will be a subtle loophole in both attention and supernatural powers. The enemy in the carriage, however, keenly captured this gap. He had been waiting for Deng Shintong to make the first move, and then waited for the opportunity to move. Deng Shintong's legs were firmly fixed on the ground, and his upper body quickly leaned back, dodging the oncoming bullet in a posture of an iron bridge. The trajectory broke a vacuum channel in the air, passed through the carriage behind, and silently swallowed up everything in its path. Chapter 1467, Extra, Deng Shintong 7. Deng Shintong's body quickly recovered. He did not rush into the carriage, but quickly jumped high and came to the top of the carriage, because he had realized that the opponent was a powerful driver. If the battle was fought in a narrow environment like a carriage, it would be more conducive to the opponent's performance. Therefore, it was necessary to come to an open area. The top of the carriage was undoubtedly the best choice. There was a carriage between the two of them, but in fact, neither of them could see each other's shadow. Inside the carriage, the eyes of the mad dog were clear. He could not see anything, but he was loading the pistol with bullets calmly. In the corner of the carriage, the girl Amber hugged her knees and curled up, but she was indifferent to the fighting outside the carriage. It seemed that she had long been accustomed to this kind of death and fighting. The mad dog raised the gun and pulled the trigger directly at the carriage above his head. The feeling of danger made Deng Shintong hurriedly dodge and retreat. But the bullets chased after him like a shadow, as if they could lock his position. Deng Shintong drew his sword to block in front of him. A bullet hit the sword accurately. The powerful force made Deng Shintong's right hand tremble. His pupils shrank suddenly, and he found that it was difficult for him to block the opponent's bullet with his body strength. Pop! Deng Shintong used all his strength to deflect the bullet, but his figure also retreated 5 or 6 steps on the carriage before he barely stopped. His eyes became cold, and his right hand turned the sword. A powerful supernatural power burst out from him, and his long silver hair moved without wind. He planned to cut open the carriage in front with a sword, forcing the opponent to show up and fight with him. But at this moment, the window of the carriage in front suddenly opened, and a black figure turned out from it, quickly swept to the top of the carriage, and looked at Deng Shintong from a distance of more than 10 meters. Praise to light, it's been a long time since I saw this kind of abilities. The middle-aged man with a big beard sighed and smiled faintly at Deng Shintong. His eyes were empty because there was no light in his eyes at this time. But as a top shooter without eyes, he still has other ways to perceive everything around him. Deng Shintong saw the man in front of him and couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then his eyes became solemn. Why is it you? Lu Pan. After the end of the world, Blizzard City has been absorbing outstanding aliens from the outside world. But in the same way, there are aliens who defected from Blizzard City. It's just that not everyone is like Gao Chongkong, who dares to directly challenge the highest power in Blizzard City. Most defectors leave Blizzard City and live as disobedience. This world is not comfortable, and Blizzard City is not a paradise. After the energy problem is solved, Blizzard City can support more people, but the stratification of society and the difficulties of the lower-class people still exist. Even aliens, the situation they need to face may be even worse. This can be seen from the fact that Zhu Zheng used aliens as consumables to improve Yuan Kongya's strength, and Lu Pan was once a captain-level figure in Blizzard City. Facing Deng Shintong's questioning, Lu Pan just shrugged. Why can't it be me? Ever since I left the huge prison in Blizzard City, I knew that I would meet you sooner or later. I just didn't expect that this day would come so soon. Deng Shintong took a deep breath and didn't say anything more. It was meaningless to persuade him to surrender, because he knew how Blizzard City treated traitors, and going back would only lead to death. He put away his long sword, and then slowly took out a black pistol. Seeing this, Lu Pan smiled and said, "You want to duel with me with a gun? Don't forget, I taught you your gun skills." Deng Shintong certainly remembered, because Lu Pan was once the best gun instructor of the Blizzard City Guard. Using a gun is the last respect for you. Deng Shintong looked at him and said lightly, "After all, I also respectfully called you a teacher." Facing this level of gun master, Deng Shintong knew that it was difficult for him to get close to the opponent with a sword. As for gun skills, he was confident that he would not be inferior to anyone. What's more, this is not a simple gun duel, but a duel between aliens. Him to light, depriving the opponent of his visual ability. Even if he can rely on the sense of insensitivity, Lu Pan cannot completely achieve the same level of seeing with a naked eye. So Deng Shintong has already seized some of the advantages by using his ability. He raised his pistol, removed the magazine in front of Lu Pan, and then ejected the bullets one by one. Lu Pan's face changed slightly. This is how he taught Deng Shintong the gunmanship many years ago. A duel between gunmen. Very good. It seems that you haven't forgotten what I taught you. Lu Pan made the same move as Deng Shintong. The two ejected all the bullets in the magazine and threw all the other guns and ammunition on their bodies off the train. In the end, only 5 bullets were left in the hands of the two. Click. Deng Shintong pressed 5 bullets into the magazine and then stuffed them into his hand. The gun loaded and finally put the gun into the holster. Opposite him, Lu Pan completed this action one step ahead. Deng Shintong, you count. Lu Pan said. Deng Shintong nodded. The two stood on the top of the fast-moving train, blowing the biting cold wind. Even if the wind and snow were strong, they could not shake their bodies. The two's hands were in an empty state, and their right hands were next to the pistols, ready to draw and fire at any time. Deng Shintong adjusted his breathing and heartbeat. 3, 2, 1. When they counted to 1, the two almost reached out to draw their guns at the same time, and the 2 thick pistols aimed at each other's heads at the same time. Must require a fatal shot.
Bang.
The special origin bullet used by Deng Shintong was wrapped in holy light, and a silver beam of light passed through the air and broke through the air. Lu Pan's bullet was black, and it was unknown what special material it was made of, but it formed a vacuum field in the air, stirring up the wind and snow all over the sky. In just a moment, the 2 bullets actually collided fiercely in midair. The head of the bullet instantly deflated, and the powerful collision of supernatural powers caused a powerful storm, which violently stirred up with the train as the center. A circular ice and snow wall tens of meters high was formed around the train. The first attack failed, and Lu Pan's figure suddenly flashed, and he quickly squatted down and shot 2 more shots at Deng Shintong's left chest and lower abdomen. His right foot stepped firmly on the top of the carriage, like a cheetah, ready to dodge Deng Shintong's bullets at any time. Chapter 1468. Extra, Deng Shintong 8. Lu Pan's gun was too fast. Even though he hadn't experienced it for a long time, Deng Shintong still felt a strong sense of crisis this time. The light of holy body blessing shone on his body like a solid armor. He twisted his body flexibly to deflect the bullets that might hit his vital parts. He dodged the blow to his left chest, but was still shot in the waist. When the black bullet shot at his body, it stirred up an invisible force. Even with the protection of holy body blessing and combat uniforms, he still felt severe pain. Humph. A wisp of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, but he endured the intense pain and fired 2 bullets at Lu Pan. Lu Pan had more experience than him. When Deng Shintong raised his hand, he had already dodged to the side and back in a Z shape. He dodged the first bullet easily. The second bullet passed in front of his face, and Lu Pan showed a triumphant smile at the corner of his mouth, but at this moment, the bullet actually exploded in front of him. A powerful impact rushed to his face, and he was thrown off the carriage. Lu Pan, times have changed, Deng Shintong said coldly. Deng's technology is the world's leading level. In the field of superpowers, they can't break through the boundaries of Ipsilon, so they took a different approach and began to study weapons crazily. The special bullet used by Deng Shintong can be actively detonated by him with superpowers. The explosives loaded in the warhead. Lu Pan did not fall off the train. At the last moment, he firmly grasped the edge of the carriage with one hand. Then he threw it hard and fell behind Deng Shintong.
While
he was still in the air, he aimed at the back of Deng Shintong's head and fired. Deng Shintong turned around and shot without hesitation. Once again, the 2 bullets collided in the air. The terrifying energy burst forced the two to keep their distance and look at each other cautiously. 5 bullets, now only the last one is left. Neither of them dared to act rashly. If this bullet could not take the other's life, they might face the fate of death. Deng Shintong took a deep breath and exhaled a thick white mist.
Boom.
The train ran forward quickly on the ice field. No one was driving, but the artificial intelligence system was moving towards the distant Blizzard City according to the original plan. Lu Pan knew this very well. Perhaps they would meet the reinforcements of Blizzard City soon, because in Lu Pan's impression, the captain of the investigation team would never act alone. So the longer the time dragged, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Thinking of this, he acted decisively, pointed his gun at Deng Shintong's head, and pulled the trigger in his hand. Deng Shintong was always paying attention to his movements. The moment Lu Pan made a move, he also made a decisive move. If there were no bullets in the guns of the two, then Deng Shintong would be better at close combat. But when the bullet came out of the gun, Deng Shintong's eyes showed a look of astonishment. Lu Pan did pull the trigger, but no bullet was fired from his gun chamber. After a moment, puff came. Lu Pan blocked Gao Changgong's bullet with his left arm, and his entire arm was directly torn off by the high-energy bullet. He had made all the plans the moment he fired the gun. Although one arm was disabled, he looked at Deng Shintong with a smug smile on his face. Then he opened the magazine with one hand, and a silver light spit out from his mouth. The last bullet was not loaded into the magazine, but into his mouth. Now I have one more bullet. Lu Pan looked at Deng Shintong. Although his left hand was disabled, his right hand holding the gun was still terrifyingly stable. Guess, can you block the shots? Deng Shintong remained silent. On this high-speed moving train, the surface is very smooth and the space for dodging is extremely limited. It is not difficult to dodge this bullet. He can do it as long as he jumps off the carriage. But for a gunman, that is equivalent to actively admitting defeat. He is not Zhang Yi. He has his own pride and does not allow him to do that. But his holy body blessing and combat uniform have greatly reduced their defense after frontal impact. If he gets shot again, as long as it's in the torso, he will definitely die. The terrifying power contained in the bullet will completely tear his internal organs apart the moment it enters his body. Lu Pan stared at Deng Shintong and smiled. You still have time to escape now. Deng Shintong also smiled. The last bullet, if you can't kill me, you will die. Lu Pan, Deng Shintong, you are too confident. Deng Shintong, I guess you will hit my head. Lu Pan sneered. No, I'm going to hit your chest. As soon as he said that, the bullet had already shot out from the muzzle of Lu Pan's gun with its bang. The last bullet also contained Lu Pan's most powerful attack, and it really went straight to Deng Shintong's chest as he said. Just when Lu Pan thought he had won, the silver combat uniform on Deng Shintong suddenly cracked, and a piece of dark silver metal popped out from his chest. Crack, crack. The dark silver metal cracked quickly, and then turned into a thin metal shield in front of him. Bang! The bullet hit the metal shield hard, directly hitting the metal shield made of adamantium alloy deeply dented, almost penetrated. Lu Pan's eyes showed a moment of surprise, and at this moment, the sound of an engine roared suddenly next to him. The Snow Wolf, Deng Shintong's car, was actually driving side by side with the train, and then fired more than a dozen missiles at Lu Pan. At this time, Lu Pan had just launched the strongest attack. His body was empty, and although he tried his best to dodge, he was still hit by the missile and was thrown off the train. Deng Shintong stood on the train, looking coldly at the former division commander, who was now a rebel and getting farther and farther away from him. He did not choose to get off the train to chase, but just covered his right lower abdomen hit by the bullet with his right hand. The inside of his body had been injured, and he let the combat suit inject drugs into his body, and then jumped to the connection of the carriage. He wanted to see what the escort of the B-level mission was. Deng Shintong stretched out his hand and pulled hard, tearing open the heavy alloy door. A girl in a white down jacket huddled in a ball at the corner of the train that was whizzing ahead. Under the brim of her white hat, her big eyes looked at him blankly. Deng Shintong was a little stunned. He looked around and found nothing else. So, he confirmed with Blizzard City again. What exactly is the escort for this B-level mission? It's a person. An alien who is suspected to have special abilities. Chapter 1469, Extra, Deng Shintong Jyoti. The information that Blizzard City gave to Deng Shintong did not specify what kind of abilities the escorted items had. It was just half a month ago that their patrol team found a girl who escaped from the territory of the Wuliang while performing their mission. According to our information, she is a servant of the Wuliang and has been following the Wuliang. But when we found her, we did not find any offensive abilities from her. Therefore, we just sent someone to bring her back for research. Deng Shintong looked at the weak girl while talking on the phone. Her face was unusually pale, and her long hair fell like a waterfall, covering half of her face. But for some reason, the moment he saw her, Deng Shintong had an impulse to protect her. It seemed that her weakness could stimulate the most instinctive desire to protect people. Deng Shintong did not get exact information, but it seemed that she should have escaped from the territory of the Wuliang. And these wandering souls were hired by the Wuliang to capture her and take her back. The ghosts were exactly the target of Deng Shintong's mission. Deng Shintong felt pity for the girl. He walked to Amber, squatted down, and smiled brightly. Don't be afraid. You are safe now. He stretched out his right hand to Amber. I am the captain of the investigation team of Blizzard City. My name is Deng Shintong. Amber looked at the gentle and handsome man in front of her, and a light gradually appeared in her eyes. She gently placed her hand in his palm. Amber. She said her name. Deng Shintong looked at her thin clothes, which seemed to be not enough to resist the severe cold in such a cold environment. So, he directly mobilized the intelligence system, and soon the Snow Wolf caught up with the train. Deng Shintong stopped the train, then opened the storage compartment on the side of the Snow Wolf, took out the spare combat uniform and handed it to her to wear. You escaped from the ghost's territory, right? He handed Amber a compressed food and asked gently, his voice like a loving father loving his daughter. Amber took the food and ate it very naturally, without any doubt that the man in front of her would hurt her. Even when facing the vicious bandits of Yuhan, she did not show any fear. But when she heard the name of Wang Liang, Her body stiffened suddenly, and the food in her hand almost fell to the ground. Deng Shintong saw this and understood everything in his heart. It seems that she is indeed a poor girl who escaped from the territory of Wang Liang. Deng Shintong said secretly in his heart. Wang Liang is the most powerful lord in this area. It is now clear that he is a captain-level strength of the disobedient. Even Blizzard City is not willing to conflict with it easily. It is not that there is not enough power, but because in the entire Jiangnan region, except for the 13 main cities controlled by Blizzard City, there are still large and small forces in other vast areas. The power of Blizzard City alone cannot clean up the entire area. The land area of Huashu country is really too huge. After the advent of the era of Great Mutation, some highly talented people have also appeared among the disobedients in the outside world. Even without the high-quality resources of Blizzard City, it has grown rapidly. Zhang Yi is an example, but not the only one. The train stopped on the desolate and huge snowfield. Amber sat on the door frame of the carriage and ate quietly. Deng Shintong stood beside her and watched her eat gently. I don't know why, when he saw her, it always touched the softest part of his heart. Can you tell me about your story? Amber swallowed the food. Deng Shintong handed her the thermos, and she drank the hot water in big gulps. Are you going to find Wuliang's? She stared at Deng Shintong and asked in a calm and even cold voice.
Yes.
Deng Shintong nodded. Amber lowered her head. I advise you not to go there to die. No one can kill him. Deng Shintong shrugged and smiled. That's because you haven't seen someone like me. He knew that Wuliang was a very powerful disobedient. In the intelligence of Blizzard City, there was a certain record of that guy. He was a very powerful and extremely cautious alien. The place where he lives is a huge frozen swamp, which the monsters call the Ice Flower Swamp. He never leaves the swamp because it is a solid barrier built by him. No alien who rashly invades it has ever walked out alive. The reason why he is wanted by Blizzard City is because half a month ago, a patrol team from Blizzard City mistakenly entered it and was killed by the monsters. The main factors that determine the outcome of the duel between aliens are as follows. First, attributes. Once the attributes are restrained, even if the ability index is stronger, it may not be able to win. For example, Zhang Yi's space-time ability is absolutely restrained for the pure physical aliens. Second, the ability index. When there is no obvious restraint between the ability attributes of the two people and the combat conditions are the same, the higher the ability index, the stronger the power of the ability and the easier it is to win. Third, the battle fighting conditions. This is an extremely important and complex condition. It includes intelligence about the enemy's capabilities and whether the battle is carried out in a suitable venue. Ice and snow aliens are on the ice. Fire aliens are in the jungle. Rule aliens weave traps like spiders, and reinforcement aliens fight in the open space. The environment is also crucial to the battle. The fourth is pure luck. The reason why the ghost is difficult to deal with and even defined as the target of the A-level task is that he not only has strong strength, but also never leaves his territory. If anyone steps into it, at least the third and most important of the above four prerequisites will be lost. However, Deng Shintong is still confident in himself. There is no other reason just because he is Deng Shintong. Amber was shocked by Deng Shintong's confidence. She thought about it, lowered her head and said, I did escape from there. But she was silent for a moment and shook her head. I can't imagine the scene of you defeating the ghost. Deng Shintong shrugged helplessly and didn't care in his heart. During his contact with Amber, he did not find anything unusual about this girl. Except for one very subtle feeling, everything else indicated that this girl was not an alien with strong fighting ability. I understand. You must be very afraid of the monsters, right? Deng Shintong looked forward, and the snow wolf slowly came to the two of them. Deng Shintong said to her, I still have to conquer the monsters now. You can sit on this chariot. It will take you back to Blizzard City safely. Chapter 1470. Extra. Deng Shintong 10. Deng Shintong planned to let Amber return to Blizzard City first, while he continued to go to the Ice Flower Swamp to conquer the monsters. Amber turned her head and looked at Deng Shintong. Her eyes were big and deep, amber in color. After thinking for a moment, she suddenly said in a cold voice, "I can take you there." Deng Shintong looked at her with some surprise. "Aren't you afraid?" Amber said lightly, "I'm not afraid. Because no one will hurt me." When she said this, she suddenly smiled sweetly. The smile was as warm as the sun, shining in Deng Shintong's heart. It made the heart of this prodigal son tremble for a long time. Deng Shintong waited for her to finish eating, then put his arm around her waist with one hand and put her on the back seat of the snow wolf. Then he helped Amber put on her helmet and said to her, "Sit tight. The wind and snow are very strong. Be careful not to be blown down." Hearing this, Amber hugged his strong waist with both hands. The snow wolf started up, and the intelligent system automatically connected to the Nebula satellite system for navigation, marking the location of the ice flower swamp, and then set off in that direction. Half a day later, they arrived at the ice flower swamp. Even from a distance, they could see the abnormality here. There were no falling snowflakes on the ground, and the entire land was a piece of crystal clear ice. In the air, messy snowflakes were flying, covering the area of dozens of kilometers in front. This can be done by a deputy captain-level ice and snow alien, so Deng Shintong didn't think it was magical. He didn't rush in on his motorcycle, but got off the car, and Amber jumped out of the car. "Do you want to go with me?" Deng Shintong looked at her and said. Amber nodded, without saying anything. Deng Shintong's eyes flashed with a strange light. He left the motorcycle outside the ice flower swamp and took out weapons and ammunition from the storage warehouse and stuffed them into his body. After thinking about it, he handed Amber a small silver pistol. "Keep this for self-defense." Amber took the pistol and put it in her pocket. Deng Shintong held his sword and walked towards the ice flower swamp step by step. Amber followed him step by step. The huge frozen swamp was as smooth as a mirror. The two of them stepped on the ice one after another, and under the thick ice, a pair of huge eyes opened indifferently and swept across the two tiny humans on the ice. Soon, pairs of huge eyes lit up in the dark swamp. The cold lake water under the ice surged, and huge and terrifying bodies approached the area where the two were silently. Deng Shintong seemed to be unaware and continued to move forward with his sword. He couldn't see the road ahead in the blizzard, but the nebula system in the sky pointed out the best way for him. The two didn't know how long they had walked, and suddenly, Amber stopped. Deng Shintong walked forward a few steps and looked back at her. Amber put her hands in the pockets of her combat uniform, half of her face hidden under the hood, and just looked at him quietly. "You are not the first Blizzard City soldier to come here. Everyone who came before you is dead. I warned you, but you didn't listen to my advice. You can't blame me for that." Deng Shintong smiled curiously. "Of course I won't blame you. I came here on my own." Amber stepped back. Suddenly, the thick ice between her and Deng Shintong exploded. Boom! The ice surface, which was more than 10 meters thick, was broken from below in an instant, and the ice blocks in the sky smashed towards Deng Shintong like boulders. Deng Shintong looked at everything in front of him with a cold look and opened his left hand forward. The white light began to shine with him as the center. Praise of light formed a huge shield, wrapping him in it, and all the huge ice blocks were blocked. But the next moment, Deng Shintong's feet suddenly collapsed. His eyes sank slightly, and he saw a huge shadow suddenly appear on the ice surface below him, covering the area under him. Crack! The heavy ice left like glass, and a huge mouth appeared under Deng Shintong's feet, full of hideous teeth with barbs, rushing towards Deng Shintong like a terrifying abyss. Crack! A hideous and thick giant mouth closed in midair, more than 10 meters long, and the thick brown skin was like armor, which made people feel fear from the bottom of their hearts after seeing it. Amber, who was not far away, watched this scene with no fluctuations in her eyes. "I reminded you. It's a pity that you are too confident in your strength. Anyway, you will die anyway, so why not help me?" The huge monster's body slowly sank, and its appearance could only be vaguely seen at this time. It turned out to be a giant crocodile more than 30 meters long, and around it, the huge shadow had already covered the area within hundreds of meters. Obviously, there was more than one such monster. Amber stood in place, but was not afraid of them attacking her at all, and those crocodiles did not look like they were going to attack Amber. Amber took a deep breath and mourned in her heart for this handsome man she had only met once, but just as she was about to go to the center of the ice flower swamp to find the Wuliang to confess her crime, a sharp white light shot up from under the ice. Puff! The ice was mixed with huge waves and blood rain rushed up to the sky. Deng Shintong, who had just been swallowed by the giant crocodile, was shrouded in holy white light and slowly fell on the ice. He looked down at the group of crocodiles in the ice flower swamp under his feet, without any fear in his eyes. These are the monsters raised by the Wuliang. It will be very difficult to deal with these guys below the captain level. The dead giant crocodile's body soon ushered in the competition of other giant crocodiles, but more giant crocodiles chose to break through the ice and attack Deng Shintong. Boom!
Boom!
Boom! The ice was obviously more than 10 meters thick, but it seemed like paper in front of him. The huge mouthparts rushed to bite Deng Shintong, and a monster that was dozens of meters long and as scary as a prehistoric monster crawled out of the ice hole. Four legs quickly crawled towards Deng Shintong. Facing the siege of these giant beasts, Deng Shintong raised the sword in his hand, and a more powerful holy light burst out from his body, like a sun, illuminating the entire ice flower swamp. The world of nothingness. All the creatures around were deprived of their vision in an instant. Even ferocious beasts would panic because they became blind. Amber looked at the empty world in front of her in surprise, and her heart began to panic for the first time. Soon, the sound of cloth being torn rang in her ears, echoing in her ears one after another. When her eyes regained clarity, she saw only a scene like Shura hell. The bodies of those mutant giant crocodiles as huge as hills were piled up, bloody and blurred, and the ice and swamp under their feet had already been stained with a lot of blood. Dear viewers, this video ends here. More TO comes soon. Please like and subscribe if not already for more videos. Thanks.